Ciso. Oh, it's fabulous! A strike to get you up off your seats.
Hello and welcome to Seagulls Social. This is the Crystal Palace away match reaction. And it's been a pretty terrible week all round, really, Jack. It's our third defeat, technically second on the bounce, actually, because of, if you don't want to count the Nottingham Forest as a technical 90-minute defeat, then you can do so. But it has been basically three defeats on the bounce, Jack. And sadly for us, we've been trying to sort of avoid being negative on this podcast, but it's quite difficult when they keep throwing results like this at you. But Jack, just quickly, obviously we're going to dissect the game, but just talk to me about your raw emotions after that game.
It's just pathetic, wasn't it? Spineless performance. I actually thought first half we weren't terrible, but like second half just didn't come out of the traps. It felt like I was watching like some of the worst of Potter at times, like just pass, no ball in the box, every single time, and it's just like, I think it exposed a few issues with our squad and maybe the lack of quality within our squad. For me personally, and I think there's a lot to, not to doom monger straight away, but I do think it sort of showed that we are very much a work in progress, and there's a lot to sort of say that, maybe people have over expected for this squad or stuff like that, and I guess we'll see, really.
Yeah, we're going to get into it, of course. But also, Jack, it didn't help that all the teams around us, aside from Bournemouth, all won. Well, Chelsea and City, obviously, in fourth and fifth drew. Yeah. But all the teams around us, Villa, Newcastle, Fulham, and Palace even now, only 4 points behind us with a game in hand. So if we want to secure that I'll start off by saying I think 8th position for me, if we can get 8th, I think that's what Conference League, I believe. It should be. Depending on what happens in the FA Cup, what happens in the European competitions, and obviously, the final standings. But it should be a Europa Conference League spot. So I think if we can secure 8th, which, we're only pointing off Fulham at the moment, there's no reason why we can't, especially with the running. We've got Leicester next coming up. And that's, for me, is a must-win now. I don't want any excuses. I don't usually come out and say this. I always say, keep the faith and, all that kind of stuff. And I never say we must win a game. But I genuinely believe now Leicester has to be a must-win game. Like, they are not a good side. They've shown it. They've got 17 points on the board. They've lost their last 5 on the bounce. Like, we can't not win that game. And if we don't, then there has to be some questions asked, I think, after that point. But let's focus on the here and now. Obviously, a disappointing game against Palace. And Jack, we started off really poorly, didn't we? They created quite a few chances in the first 10 minutes. And Mateta, 3 minutes in, he just, like you said, just slow and off the blocks. We just weren't at it from the get-go. And that pass from Eze just into Mateta, too easy. I questioned Dunkey maybe being a bit too deep, like allowing Mateta in that position. That'd be my only sort of criticism. Again, people jumping on Dunkey, I think was a bit harsh. I think people just looking for scapegoats at the moment. I think, he wasn't like a standout, terrible player for us. Obviously, he's had a tough season this season, but I don't think he was a standout, disappointment or underperformer in that team. I think in general, no one really turned up yesterday. So, that first goal, Jack, bitter disappointing so early on in the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, just go behind, not what you want to do in a derby game, and it just started as badly as it could have, really. It's funny that I almost thought that, like in the Forest game, for example, if we'd gone 1-0 down, it might have galvanised us a bit and we could have brought it back. And maybe a little bit in this game, sort of, I thought it could be a spark, and it was a little bit. Like, we did then start playing some nice stuff and eventually went on to equalise a bit. It's a terrible start. I wouldn't really blame anyone. I think Dunks kept him on side, which was really, really poor. Yeah. But other than that,
it was a great finish. You got to put your hands up as well. Annoyingly, he looked when I saw him with his little thing on for his ear, I was like, he looks like a water polo player. And then he's bloody finished that top bins, and it was a great finish, good touch from him, and a good finish, to be fair. But it's just for me, from a Brighton perspective, it was just so sloppy. It was so poor so early on in the game. In those games, you don't want to concede early. I know that's very Michael Owen of me to say, but keep it tight for the first 20 minutes and see how it goes. Because, like you said, Jack, after we conceded the goal, we actually looked pretty good, and especially the equaliser as well. It was a really good ball in from Minter and a great finish from Welbeck as well. So yeah, we did look good in parts of that first half, I think. And then let's talk about that goal. Yeah, great build up, a great ball in from Minter and a great finish from Welbeck as well. And I suppose we were talking about in the preview, weren't we, about how we want Minter and Matoma to be putting balls into the box like that and players to be on the end of it. And lo and behold, Welbeck did just that.
Yeah, it's a great goal, great way to get back into the game, perfect kind of reaction. I can't really fault us too much between conceding the goal and half time, to be honest. And I think, do you know what? I think I've said a lot on Twitter, but I thought Matt O'Reilly had one of the better halves that he's had for us. Jury's still out a little bit with him for me, but that was a really positive part of that. So it was a good way to respond.
Yeah, it was a good goal. And talking about O'Reilly, actually, Jack, I've seen very mixed opinions on O'Reilly. And look, personally, I think he has had a very underwhelming start to his Brighton career. Obviously, the injury at Crawley did not help.
My cat has come to say hello, which is like
hello, cat.
Ever on this podcast.
Hello,
Beans
what's your cat's name?
Beans. There you go.
Beans, very apt. Very Jack Albion name there. I like it. But yeah, Beans making an appearance. Beans, do you have any thoughts on the game?
No, she had to live with me through lockdown, so I think she hates football with a passion. But
right,
sorry, moving back on, that's cheered us all up a little bit, hasn't it? You see my cat. But I think Matt O'Reilly did okay. So yeah, I wasn't too disappointed with him, but.
Talking about O'Reilly, he's had a lot of mixed opinions. Like I said, the injury at Crawley has not helped his start of his career. I think he'd never had an injury. Is that right? Like a serious injury up until, which is crazy to think. But now he's had a few. He's had a few injuries now, which is massively frustrating for him. He can't really get into his rhythm, and it's tough to judge a player when they haven't played as much as you'd like them to. And I think that's where you have to sort of give a bit of leeway, where you think, right, fair enough. If he started a lot of games and he's been poor in all of them, then fair enough. You can sort of criticise him and look at him and think, is he the answer? But yeah, I agree with you, Jack. I think in that first half, he looked very bright. He was part of a lot of the attacks. He was linking up well with Minter on the right. And he looked decent. And it was a great ball in from Minter and a great finish from Welbeck. And I thought after that, was it the belaboured chance as well, where he struck it with sort of like a bit of a moving shot for Henderson to save, and then I think it was Welbeck on the follow up, wasn't it? Who was unlucky. I don't know if he was offside or not, but he was unlucky to not finish that. So that first half, do you know what? I agree with you. I think we played maybe the better football, if you want to call it that. But again, it wasn't exactly the best Brighton Hove Albion we've seen, especially this season. And then going into the second half, Jack, it's sort of. Yeah, it just got worse, really, didn't it? And
we just didn't come back for the second half. Second half, we just didn't come out the blocks at all. Like, we just really didn't get in our rhythm. I just thought it was just the quality just wasn't there. We weren't playing. The players weren't bringing quality to the game. It was so frustrating to watch. I just think you need to come out. I don't know what the team talk was, but it clearly just didn't have the desired effect. And then we conceded a goal, which admittedly wasn't a quality goal. I don't think it was particularly anything special. It took a big deflection, Daniel Muniz, but they're getting players into the right positions, and I think that is something that we really lack. We don't have these sort of runners to the edge of the box who are getting on these positions to sort of hit one from into the bottom corner or to make these sort of runs. And I just think it's such slow movement forward, whereas they can just sort of turn defence to attack almost instantaneously.
On that, Jack, it's a really good point actually, and I wanted to bring it up. Talking about that transition from defence to attack, I think obviously when we had Webster in the side with Van Heck, I think we were pretty good with that. Those sort of forward balls, and historically speaking, Donkey's passing range is a joke. We've seen it multiple times in his career where he makes that diag pass, he makes those little through balls, or even those simple passes to Matoma or Minter out wide. He's very good at that. But I felt like yesterday it just wasn't that wasn't the case at all with him and Van Heck. They just weren't finding those balls. And I think that's a really good point, Jack. That defence from attack, we've really struggled recently. Since Webster's come out the team, since that Forest game, I feel like we've really lacked that. And I don't know why that is, because Donkey, that is an asset of his game, that passing range. So yeah, I don't want to blame Donkey, and I don't want to blame him being the reason why our transition from defence to attack has got worse in the last couple of games. But yeah, what do you think it is? Why do you think it is that? Why do you think the build up is so slow now?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Webster definitely suffered, just to bring it back a little bit, Webster definitely suffered under De Zerbi in that he didn't really, his passing wasn't as good in the sort of the high pressure short term, but Adam Webster is he was, when he was at prime under Graham Potter, he was one of the best ball carriers forward. And Lewis Duncan...
Yeah, I remember that actually, yeah.
And I think this is what the problem is. I think Herzler's style is more suited towards, ball carrying centre-backs who can carry it forward. Now, what I think the issue was I don't think Van Heck's passing was as good as it could have been yesterday. The amount of times I felt yesterday he would just dink a ball over the top to absolutely no one. And it happened far too many times to sort of think, is this what we're kind of looking at with ideas now? So, yeah, that was particularly frustrating. I don't think Dunk defensively was too bad, but yeah, I think it's not up to the centre-back to lead the attack at the end of the day. So I'm very hesitant to sort of single him out for any sort of complaints. But yeah, it was just like such a game lacking of quality. That's what my frustration was. There was no quality balls. There was no sort of quality play into the box. It was just the same old tired, right, we're going to walk it from centre-back to full-back to winger. Oh no, there's no room. We'll go back to the full-back, into the central midfielder, across again. It was like Potter ball on crack with just more passing around, yeah.
No, I agree. And talking about Van Heck, actually, yeah, I was disappointed with Van Heck because he's been our star boy, especially at centre back. He's been brilliant all season, but I think he was pretty poor yesterday. Obviously, got sent off in the end as well. But yeah, I didn't think he had a great game. And my big complaint about the Munoz goal was, of course, it was a deflection, and I think Verbruggen probably had it covered. In all fairness, if it didn't take that nick, but what I was disappointed at was Estepinian just backing off Munoz rather than trying to close him down. He sort of just like, oh, go on, mate, yeah, have a pop if you want. And I think that pressing and that sort of, like you said, just that lethargic approach to our defence was just an issue. And I think we allowed them way too much space, even with the Mateta goal, backing off him and giving him all the room in the world to have a shot. It was just that, it's strange because usually, like you said, under De Zerbi or even under Potter, that press, we used to stifle attackers and we used to stifle midfield. And I feel like we've really sort of lost that edge in defence with that. And to be fair, a lot of football's been played, so maybe that could be a factor. I don't know.
I think the factor is, I think lethargic is a good word. It just looked lethargic and yeah, the international break kind of came at the worst time, and you always think,
it's killed us, hasn't it?
And you always think the international break is a bit of a rest and a period where you can sort of recuperate. But with the amount of internationals we have in our team now, lots of people praise the internationals, and it's great for the profile of the club. But having more internationals will always lead to these kind of situations where you're having players not just going from having 2 weeks off; they're playing Saturday, Tuesday over an international break, and it's frustrating because I just don't think, I think it's just completely derailed our season, and it's so frustrating because players have also got injured, so now we're stuck in this sort of situation where we are going low on numbers and we are having like a crisis of who do we bring off the bench because there isn't the options available.
No, 100%. Even talking about the right back situation, obviously Lamptey out, Veltman out, which I think is a huge loss. I think we always talk about how important he is to that defence. I just think, I was so upset that Veltman wasn't fit when Herzler released his team news on Thursday, and he said that he wasn't fit. I was really disappointed because knowing that Jack Hinchelwood will be at right back, I just think he's so much better in centre midfield. I know you said it as well, Jack, in the match preview. But it's such a shame to not have him alongside Baleba in centre midfield. I think not to say he struggled at right back, but I just don't. It's not his natural position. And I think teams have sort of found a little bit of joy against him on his right hand side. And I think it's just it's frustrating because that's not his natural position. And if we just had that natural right back, I think we'd be looking so much more better defensively. But yeah, just one of those annoying goals to concede. I think that Munoz one, like you said, deflection. Just could we have pressed a little bit better? Could we have sort of not allowed the shot? But again, it's one of those things. But going on to later in the game, also you made some changes. They brought on Nketiah, they brought on Chilwell. We then brought on Adingra, João Pedro, March and Gruder. Out of those four, Adingra, João Pedro, March and Gruder, who were you? Do you feel like any of them came on and impacted the game as such?
Not at all.
No. Yeah.
Sorry,
That was my disappointment, yeah.
And I think this is the frustration. We have this depth in the squad, and I think the depth is great. And I've seen, a lot of people are heralding this some of our, our best, deepest squad ever. And I think it just showed that some of the strength of depth off the bench, it just doesn't have the quality to be able to provide those moments. And yeah, it's I think a lot of these players work very hard, and some of these players who came off the bench, I think Pedro is obviously an exception, and he was the only one who could really make a difference. Although I do think he's better from the start, but alas, we move on. But it's a lot of these players work very hard. Adingra and Gruder too, I definitely think work very hard, but they're not doing anything, and that's the cold hard facts. Like they're working hard. Are they crossing in good balls? No. Are they providing goals and assists? No. Like, we need to start seeing some sort of output from these players. Because, and it's not to single out Matt O'Reilly, because I don't think he's really had a chance, but I think he does fall into this category a bit. With that, we've brought in players which are probably almost a combined 100 million, and I'm not really seeing what they've brought to our squad. We spent 200 million on players, and I'm looking at some of these players, and I'm just not necessarily seeing what they've brought to us.
No, I agree. I think it's one of those sort of transfer windows where we've brought in players for the future. It seems. I know Weaver and O'Reilly are 24, 25. I think they're in their sort of mid-20s, but the rest of them, Gruder, I think he's just not 19, 20, and then you've got so many younger players coming off the bench, and it's. They're not for the here and now, which is the frustrating thing. And I think they've all got bright futures, but I agree with you, Jack. It's like when they're coming on, what are they doing to affect the game? And you want those players to come off the bench and affect the game in a positive manner, whether it's goals, assists, or even key passes to lead to assists, which I don't think they're even doing that. So it's definitely an issue. And I agree with you. I think even though we have got the strength in depth in terms of numbers, have we got the quality? No, I agree with you. I don't think we have. And I think just to give you the stats for the second half, to have 2 shots on target in that second half, ultimately against 9 men. I know it was 10 minutes to go when they did go down to the last 12 minutes when they weren't down to 9 men. But in those last 12 minutes, it was criminal for us to only have that Ayari shot on goal. Yeah. I think it's absolutely criminal. That is our only real chance. I saw Baleba had a few pop shots, and it's just like, why are we doing that? Why are we not creating quality chances? And I think that's the biggest frustration.
Well, I think they're the big issue about why we're not creating. Oh my god! I think we've killed Maz finally. I
did cough, but I did go mute.
I think the problem is that we've lost the best quality player that we will ever have for the price, and it's not to go on about because we've got to move on because Gross wasn't going to be around forever, but. I'm looking back at games. I'm looking at games like, for example, last season when we played Crystal Palace, we drew 1-1, right? Why did we draw 1-1? Because of a cross by the best quality player that we had, which is Pascal Gross. And I just don't think these players that we have are providing quality chances. And that's what it is. The chance creation isn't there. Now, I get that it can sometimes be the system that stifles them, especially when you're not having much possession. And I think that's definitely been a problem when we've been playing more of the counter-attacking football that we had recently. We weren't actually creating that many chances, but we were putting them away, and we were doing well in scoring goals, and that's fine because we're defending for a lot of it. But the problem is when we go behind, we then suddenly get a lot more of the ball. And if you can't make quality chances against 9 men, where you're kind of putting the balls in and making quality chances, then you've got to look at the squad. There is only so much that Hersler can tell a player to do, but if they aren't providing quality balls into the box, then there's not a lot more that he can do. So I'm not saying the players are shit, because I do think there's this kind of the idea that I'm sort of going, wow, all these signings are crap. I don't think they are. There's quality in there, but they've got a lot to prove, and a lot of them have got to get used to this league. Now, we spent a lot of money, but I think there's a lot of this sort of European sort of player who just aren't adjusted to the Premier League. And you look at the signings who've been a success this season, and they're ones who've come from the Championship. You know, like Jorginho, who came from the Championship. And yes, Minter's done really well, and I think he's probably the sort of the
exception to the rule.
Exception to the rule. That's the word I was looking for. In that he did play in Europe and he's come in and done really well. But even then, he took quite a long time to sort of look like he was giving us a meaningful input. So, yeah, there's a little bit of frustration for me there in that I think we've brought in a lot of these sort of attacking midfielders, and I'm not really seeing how they fit into a perfectly functional team because we have glaring holes. You know, you shouldn't be spending £200 million on players and still having glaring holes in your team. That's what worries me a little bit. And yeah, there are a couple of things, you know, whether it's style or whatever, we've got to change something in that sense, and they've got to step up a little bit. I think some of these players, you know, it's all very good telling them that that you know we don't want them to, that they're going to be good in the future, but they just haven't quite been stepping up yet. And I think that is going to be the problem with the inconsistency for the rest of the season. You look at Villa. Sorry, I've done a lot of talking here, but you look at Villa, for example, and they're really coming into their own now, aren't they? They've won
seven. They got ridiculous
seven in a row or something like that. And the reason they are is because they have that experience and that strength and quality that they can step up in these occasions. And yes, we have a lot of quality, but it's starting to fall apart a little bit because they're inconsistent. So, look, I stand by. I was quite happy with us giving a good fight for Europe this season, and I think we've done that. But I did think this is the stage where it could all come a little bit unstuck without the experience that we can get.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and talking of experience, I think you mentioned him already. Pascal Gross coming into these situations, I think, would have been huge, and having that creativity to unlock defences is something we've missed a lot this season. And even talking about the second half, Jack, like 70% possession we had, overall 62% possession, and it's like it's all great being having the ball, but Palace looked really dangerous on the counter. You know, that every time they sort of went on the counter, they looked like they could score, and it's like, yeah, what's the point of having all this possession if you're just going to let teams give them the ability to counter and hit you on that? It's just frustrating. But talking of the sending offs, let's quickly go through those. Obviously, Gahey, I think, was a given, as well as Nketiah as well. Nketiah diving for the first one. Yeah. He was done for simulation, which I think was just. I think Estepinian barely touched him, and he sort of flung his leg and fell to the floor. So I think we can all agree that was a pretty straightforward yellow. And then, of course, his second one where it was a high boot, and Van Heck obviously did lean in, but even Eze, I don't know if you saw Eze's reaction. He literally straight away put his hands on his head to the Neil Warnock and was like, yeah, that's a sending off. So I think all the Palace players knew that was a given. And then Gahey as well. I don't know what he was thinking to do that when it was so needless. I think to, again, go in mid-rift and sort of he did fully catch him as well. So I think he was quite lucky to get away with just a yellow card for that one, to be honest. I think that could have easily been a straight red. I think they checked for it as well, VAR, but decided to stay with the on-field decision of a yellow, which was quite interesting. And then, of course, Van Hecker as well. His second yellow.
Not Van Hecker's fault,
stupid,
in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, but it was, for me, it was just a stupid. Like I think if he hadn't been on a yellow already, I think he could have easily got a straight red for that.
Yeah, definitely.
In the last one, but I agree with you. I don't think it was. He sort of got left.
It was a shit back pass. It's a shit back pass again from Weefa. And look, I'm not a Weefa hater. I do think there's something in there. There's something, but it's just that little bit lack of quality, which is causing moments like that. You know, a little bit too under hit. You're playing in the Premier League now, buddy. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you've got to concentrate on it. And I think that just happened far too much. You know, I remember because where we're situated, we had March out wide. The amount of times the ball would go out to March, but it'd be just under hit, that he's having to struggle to get to the ball, or it gives it a chance for the man to get a lot closer. And I just thought, like I say, it just happened too many times. So I do feel a bit bad for Van Heck in that I just don't think he should have been put in that position. But then at that point you've got to take the red card because they're down to 9.
No, agreed. Yeah, he sort of had no choice really to do it, but I think he was quite lucky just to get the second yellow, because I think if he'd not been on a second yellow, I think that could have potentially been a straight red just because of
definitely,
the last man sort of situation. But yeah, also as well, talking of March, I'll be honest, I was a bit perplexed with him coming on when he did and for Minter. I just think personally, I don't know, I would have personally brought him on at right back and played Hinshelwood, would have kept Hinshelwood in centre midfield, or maybe made something a bit, because I just felt like he was quite ineffective out on that wing. I don't think, he again, talking to substitutions coming on, none of them did anything, and it was just... No. It was like, what are you on the pitch for? And then Weaver as well. I'm sorry, but that moment where the ball fell and he went sort of to shoot, he could have just left it for João Pedro, and João Pedro could have had a much better opportunity, a much better striker of the ball, and he could have a chance to have a pop at it rather than Weaver. And again, I'm the same as you, Jack. I don't like sort of jumping on players and I don't like singling players out, but yeah, it's just those moments, like you said, it's that lack of quality where Weaver again just have that awareness of letting the ball drop to João Pedro. João Pedro is a much better striker of the ball than you. He's a clinical finisher. He's much better when it comes to those situations. Literally by the penalty area. Penalty spot. Sorry, and just let him have a pop at it. And I was just shouting. I was just like, why have you gone for it? Just leave it for him and let him have a pop. And then of course, that Ayari chance right at the end as well. Just pretty simple. In the end, it was a difficult angle for him. To be fair, it was good effort considering the way it dropped and the way it fell to him. So no complaints there. But just not enough to create. Well, like I said, to create one chance in that last 12 minutes. Sorry, it's just criminal. I think we have to create more chance, better quality chances, and some of the crosses overhit as well. Basic
corners.
Stuff.
Corners, corners. Like straight over to the man waiting. It's just that kind of stuff again and again, and because I don't want to just sit here and moan about Brighton, because I always think that's such an easy thing to do. But I really didn't think, and look, I'm not trying to disrespect Crystal Palace here. I just don't think they were outstanding and really had to work for a win.
I agree. I agree.
They worked very hard defensively. I will give them that credit. That I do think they worked very hard to sort of defend with 9 men. But
we didn't do anything to test the defence.
Yeah, we didn't. And
they had an easy job. They had Lerma playing at centre back.
Yeah,
like how are we not making his afternoon difficult? Why are we allowing a centre midfielder to have an easy job at centre back?
And I think I do think this is like some of the options that we always seem to get left with. Like, we didn't have game changers on the bench, really. Bringing on, in the 93rd minute, you would think there'd be an option for us to just go, right, we'll just chuck someone on. And we just chuck Weaver on. Like with all respect, when you're chasing the game in the last minute, I don't think Weaver's the sort of player which you're thinking is going to massively change this. So it's a really, really frustrating...
To be fair, the only other 2 options was our goalkeeper, Rushworth, Cashin, and Tasker, to be fair. But I agree with you. It's like, just don't bring him on. What was the need in bringing him on? I didn't really understand that. I agree with you. I think it's like, what was Hinshelwood not offering that Weaver would offer in that situation?
100%.
So
it's very frustrating in that point of view. Yeah, there's not a lot more to say, really. I think I agreed with what I said pretty much. I really don't want people to turn on Hörsler, because this is such an important part of the season, and I can already, the Hörsler outers are already like creeping back out. And look, whatever. Like, if you don't think he's as good as De Zerbi or whatever, fine, get on with it, get over it. But like, you've got to back him for this last few games, because the expectation it's so hard to manage. I think for me, beginning of this season, my expectation was 8th to 10th, and then anything on top would be great. And I think what has made it worse is that some smaller teams are doing better, like Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth were, although they've fallen behind now. They've had a serious collapse, almost sort of like on the levels of other teams. So and then of course Fulham have had a little bit of a resurgence now, and we just need to just kind of take stock. I think there has to be kind of a point where we look at all our squad and we don't always have players in their prime, and that is becoming a little bit frustrating, and evidenced by that we are struggling with a bit of the experience side. We either have a very experienced player like Welbeck or Dunk at the moment, or Veltman, who are probably, Welbeck's sort of proving the exception to the rule in that he is playing some of the best football of his career now. But in reality, a 34-year-old, 33-year-old is probably further past their best than you'd imagine. And Or on the flip side, we have people who have no experience whatsoever. And I just think a summer maybe makes them all a bit more experienced. We can get used to it. But at the moment, I'm just seeing a lot of inexperienced players sort of not really know how to deal with low blocks, and tactically clever managers are finding quite an easy way to defend against it.
No, 100%. It was funny enough, actually, just watching the Manchester derby just now. Gary Neville gave a very scathing post-match review of how football is in general, and he just said that football in the Premier League as a product now is just so boring, and so teams are afraid to be expressive and attack and show that different element of taking players on, and very static. And I think he makes a really good point. I think if you watch most games now, they are pretty like that. Like you said, that Brighton Palace game even yesterday, it did lack quality. I think from both teams, and I think I don't know what it is. If it's just a general sort of Premier League thing now, where and maybe it's the stage of the season, people there's less to fight for, etc., etc. But it does feel like a lot of games now are both teams don't sort of seem to want to win, and even Liverpool struggling over the line, and they're meant to be Premier League champions soon, and then you've got Southampton doing a derby, and Leicester not far behind, Ipswich pretty much relegated now, and it's of course there is a European race on, and of course those teams are we've mentioned Fulham, Bournemouth, those teams there, they are we're all still in the mix, we're all trying to fight for European spots, but it just feels like, I don't know, it just feels quite flat and weird with a lot of teams that just seems like there's not much quality anymore. Even the Forest Cup game, that it was, that first 90 minutes was pretty tough to watch at times. And I don't know if it's a general thing or whether it's just a, particular teams. I don't know if you can give a bit of more insight than me, Jack.
What? Yeah, no, I think it's sort of, I don't know. I don't know whether we're sort of a symptom of that. And it does seem players are very robotic in a way, and they're very scared to sort of.
I think that's what Gary Neville literally said. The word robotic.
It's interesting, this sort of last 12 minutes, and a lot's been made of it, of injury time, whatever. How we're only creating one chance. Well, you've made a lot of it, of course, and which is right. And it is interesting because the players were in positions to make balls into the box, but they're so hesitant to do so. Now, there does seem to be this fear of, unless you're making the perfect ball, you should look for the better option. And the way that passing football is, and maybe this is maybe it's a little bit of a criticism of Hurst's style, in that we're not kind of just going right, bang, ball in the box, hit it across the front. When I play football, and I know I'm talking Battersea fucking five-a-side, but when you get to the edge of the corner, you just hit it across the box because you want to see who might get a tap in or something like that. And we do just sort of seem to lack that sort of stuff, and to put it into those sort of places. So yeah, I think maybe we are a little bit of a symptom of that, but also I think we're just lacking in quality, and whether that's the sort of maverick quality that I think. And now I think this is a very interesting point that I'm about to make. I would, because it's my own point, but
go on, I'm listening.
There's no kind of. Do you know? It's funny. I saw, of all the players talking about this, it was David McGoldrick, Notts County striker. He said there are no real mavericks left in football now. And I do feel like our squad is becoming a bit more like robotic database players. A player like Knockhart probably wouldn't have the greatest data, the last player to score a winner there, because when he scored that winner at Palace last time, I don't think that was an expected goal of any high level. He just hit that from range, and it went in the top corner. And I do think we sort of lack this a bit, and I do think some of Palace, a player like Munoz seems to score a lot of goals for a right back, and I think that's because he just goes forward and hits it. And I do think we need our players taking risks. I want to see some of our players taking shots or putting a ball into a box or something like that, because it does seem that the option is right. Let's stop and go back to Van Heck. And it was a problem we had massively under Potter.
Very stop-start.
Yeah. We had that under Potter like massively, and I think that was probably my biggest criticism of Potter's time. And he's the sort of, new wave manager, the sort of, nerdy guy, hipster sort of manager. And it's the same with Fabian Hurstler to a certain extent. And I do think we sort of are losing this sort of, the edge where we can just go do something stupid. Because it might go in.
Yeah. Well, Jack, on that, actually, talking of sort of managers, again, not to harp on about what Gary Neville said after the game, but he made another point about managers basically trying to imitate Pep Guardiola, but doing a really terrible job of it, which I thought was actually a very interesting point, because you do see a lot of managers now, having that sort of Pep Guardiola approach to their teams, but they're not Pep Guardiola, and they don't have the riches that Man City do. And so you've got to sort of sometimes as well appreciate the players you have and cater to them. Like, again, talk about the Manchester derby. Amorim, I think, is a good example of him being so stuck on this 3-5. I think he played 3-5.
5-5-2.
I can't do my maths. Yeah, that's it. 3-5-2. And he's been so stuck on his ways in that, and like people are questioning, like, should he give it up or should he carry on with it? And it's like, fair enough. Stick to your philosophy and stick to what's made you get so far in your career. Obviously, that's why you're so successful at Sporting. But maybe sometimes managers do have to look at it and think, right, I don't have those players at my disposal. I don't have a Gyökeres up top. I don't have, whoever he might have had in that system to play the kind of football he wants to. And I think you've got to, sometimes be appreciative. And maybe that's one thing of Herzler that I maybe sort of have a slight criticism of. Is like, sometimes maybe he doesn't have the players to play his system he wants to play. And maybe he does have to just maybe he does have to tailor it a little bit more and a little bit better and a bit differently with each game, which I think he's done at times. Don't get me wrong. I think there's been games where he's shown that tactical nous, and he's shown going into games that he has got it right. But yeah, there have been times, Forest being the standout for me, where he got it wrong, and you've got to sometimes come out and just say, look, I've got it wrong. And again, that after the post-match Palace, I think he said something like, really happy with how our efforts and something, and he didn't really Again, maybe because he doesn't feel like he's culpable, and I don't think he was. I agree with you. I don't think he was culpable for that defeat. But sometimes maybe it is just like, right, well, something's quite not working here. Maybe I do need to adapt. Maybe I do need to change things up.
Yeah, and I do agree with you that I don't think it is massive, but I think there's adapting systems, and we haven't really seen a system yet that's been as clear. I think the clearest we had was really in the 6-game winning streak, where we did sort of become more of a counter-attacking side, I would say, and we sort of now what.
And then yesterday was quite possession dominated.
Yeah, possession dominated.
Switch.
It's a switch, and maybe we do need to stick to one thing. But I do think that, like, as much as you can blame that on Herzler, I do think he's suffering a little bit in that I don't know whether he has the players to play his system now. Now, that is, there's two sides to this. You either bring in a manager who can adapt to the players that he has and play any kind of system. That's kind of thing. And I do think Herzler has a bit of that, like you said. But then also, you've got to look at the recruitment. The recruitment, are we signing players who can play a system? I think the defensive problems, with getting done on the counter, the defenders haven't been quick enough for years. Van Heck, Webster, Dunk, and Igor are not blessed with pace, and we have been screaming out for a bit of pace in the centre of defence. So, yeah, it's quite frustrating that's kind of manifested itself all at once this season, and it's very disappointing to see. And it's one that I think we've almost been screaming out for a long time. But, it is what it is, and I think Herzler should not play a high line if he sees that as his options. But then again, if he wants to achieve success, he wants to play his own system. And, another player, not to bring him up again, but another problem is Matt O'Reilly, who I think is a really, really good player, and he's very good in Scotland. But I'm not seeing where he fits in this system at all. Like, he's not sort of the attacking midfielder. Maybe sort of that right central midfielder playing a free in midfield is maybe a further way forward, but then Herzler can't teach his system what he wants to do. So, and for another one, look, he's come under a lot of criticism, and I think there is quality within him, in him, but I don't see where he fits. We've just bought 100 midfielders for a manager who went publicly that I don't play a midfield. There's not a huge amount of logic for that from that to me. So. Yeah, there's a little bit of frustration on a recruitment point of view. And this was another interesting thing. God, I'm getting it all out. All the things that I've ranted about over the last 24 hours. So, I understand we're buying a lot of players who won't be ready yet. I fully accept that. Like, Gruder's definitely one of them. He's a young player who we brought in for a very big fee, to be fair, which I think will always have a little bit of added pressure. But I think he should ignore that pressure and just do what he does. But a lot of these young players over the last season that we have built up over a number of years have suddenly disappeared. You know, a player like Buonanotte was brought in because he will be good in 5 years' time, let's say. But my problem with that is when he's had the opportunity, you know, end of last season, Buonanotte was getting in a team, playing well. He scored a couple of goals. He looked like a decent little player, didn't he? And then, you know, like in this summer, we're like, oh yeah, we've got a load of other shiny new toys, so we're going to send you out on loan. You know, we spent so long like building this player up. The same goes for Enciso. You know, it looks like Enciso's gone now. You know, we put a lot of effort.
Barco as well, doing really well at Strasbourg.
But Barco is doing well at Strasbourg, but I think there were other things implied in
other issues. Yeah,
his departure, and Ferguson, another one. Although, you know, he's not exactly pulling up trees at West Ham, and I'm not seeing what we're getting out of the West Ham loan in any way, shape, or form at all at the moment. Like he seems to be on loan playing 1 or 2 minutes, like literally playing 2 minutes.
He did start the other day, but I think apparently one of my West Ham friends said he had a stinker.
Yeah, exactly,
and pulled for a full crook.
And you know, he's just not bringing anything to them, and I wonder, you know, yeah, he probably wouldn't have done anything, but he could have always come on as an option yesterday. You know, you
talk about the UEFA substitution at 93 minutes.
Yeah.
If he was on the bench, obviously he'd probably come on earlier, but that could be another option.
That's a bit of quality, and you know, it's interesting because earlier in the season, another thing that's interesting that I'm saying, which is like, because at the beginning of the season, I do remember thinking like we should take a defender off the bench because who's playing, because we've got so much attacking wealth. Now we're sort of seeing where we don't have any attacking wealth, so we're having to put more defensive players on the bench. So, yeah, I do think some of the holes in the squad are sort of manifesting themselves. And one big thing though, I do
injuries.
One big this is what I was just going to say. We have had an unprecedented amount of injuries this season. I do think it's worth looking into from the club now. I think it has sort of manifested itself to we're taking the piss here. Like, you know, to have this many players injured, serious injuries, you know, impact injuries, it just seems to be building up and up. You know, players, I think the worrying ones are the ones where players are like, oh yeah, they'll be back next week, and then they're gone for, well, in Fernie's case, an entire season. And yeah, I just think there's a couple of like alarm bells ringing from stuff, and it's nothing to do with the manager, in my opinion.
No, I agree. Well,
I don't think it's nothing
injury list, Jack.
I don't think it's nothing to do with the manager, but I don't think the manager is the
the blames.
Yeah,
I don't think the blame's on him at this stage. I think he's proven it for me over the season that he has got the qualities to be a great manager, and I think we need to stick with him and just see how we recruit. Yeah, recruit in the summer. Recruit in the summer and see where we are, and then let's say we get to Christmas and things aren't going well. Then maybe look into replacing him. But I think, we need to stick by him. And Jack, talking of injuries, Igor, Kadioglu, Lamptey, Milner, Rutter, Steele, Veltman, Webster. To have that many players out, look, we don't want to blame injuries, but of course, they are a massive factor. Like, you can't you can't deny that. And, you know, you look at teams like Spurs, even I feel a bit for Ange, you know, he's getting a lot of stick, but he's had a ridiculous amount of injuries this season. And don't get me wrong, he's now got pretty much a fully fit squad and he's still not doing great. No. But I think you have to factor in injuries are a big part when you have got 3, 6, 8 players out at the moment. That has to be a factor. You can't just ignore that and say, oh, well, he should be doing well with the players that's available to him. Like, come on, when you've got essentially 4, 5 starters there, probably out injured, that would probably start in that team or at least come off the bench, then I think that's definitely a factor to.
A huge miss is Kadioglu. I think he was really starting to come into his own before he got injured, and you know he scored a goal.
And he would have covered left back, right back, just that versatility is huge, isn't it?
And I just don't think we're getting the best out of anyone, putting him out of position. You know, I do feel for Jack because he's just being asked to play right back, and it's so obvious that he's a better midfielder.
I think he's probably the first to admit that, and also as well, like, be frustrated the fact that he's not getting the minutes at centre midfield. But Jack, we've covered pretty much everything. I think there's a lot we've gone into, and
I don't want it to be like another ranting one, but we've lost, so it's not going to be a happy one.
We've done 44 minutes now.
And I think
I don't think we've been too
No.
negative. I think we just sort of discussed as to what we think are the issues. And
I think it is more of an
what's been going on.
exasperation, isn't it? It's sort of like, oh God, we just need a little bit more quality. We need to put a little bit in, and it's just one of those days. It just happened to be that one of those days was against like your biggest rivals, and you let them do the double for the first time in almost 100 years.
The first time since 1933.
Yeah,
they've done the double.
Hitler was still in the Reichstag then, so
yeah, good reference.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah,
but no, it's ridiculous. Like, how long? And obviously a bitterly disappointing afternoon. We've got Van Heck suspension now for Leicester going into Leicester game. We are going to do a Leicester preview, but Jack, like I said at the top of the show, I think it's a huge game for me. I hate to use the word must win because I don't ever use it, but I genuinely believe that this is a must win. We can't get anything but 3 points at home to Leicester, who are essentially relegated.
They're shit. Yeah.
They are. Yeah. Let's be real. Let's talk facts. We have to beat them.
I hate going in with they're not very good, but they haven't scored like a goal for a long time, have they now?
I think January. 6 games.
Someone said like they haven't scored since January, which would
maybe
be insane.
That's crazy.
And we definitely need to be looking at that as that's a game we need to win, really. So there's a bit of pressure on that. And at the end of the day, if we're not beating Leicester with 7 games left, and in all reality 4 more wins is going to get us with our fixtures, we are sort of kissing goodbye to European football a little bit there, in my humble opinion. So
I think we need to, especially with how the results went this weekend, with all the teams around us winning. I think the next game is pivotal into like you said, if we want to get that 8th spot, which is looking likely is going to be a Conference League spot. I think it's huge in that pursuit because to be fair, looking at our fixtures, to be honest with you, we actually have got some winnable games in there. Let me quickly bring them up. Bear with me 2 seconds. So, like we said, Leicester next. And then we've got Brentford away, which is going to be a tough one, with that little rivalry there with Bloom and their owner. And then you've got West Ham at home, which is a very winnable game. That they're not playing great. Obviously, one to get over Potter as well would be lovely. Then we've got Newcastle at home, which will be a tough game. Wolves away, which, again, they've pretty much secured safety now. So that could potentially be one of those games
could have
we go
Wolves
into.
on the beach, So
exactly. And then final 2 games is Brighton at home to Liverpool, which again,
but they
tough
could
game,
be on the
but
bench. They could be on the beach.
They could be on the beach if they tied up the league, which they should have done by then.
Yeah.
They should have done by then. I know they had a poor result this weekend, but they should have tied it up. And then final one is Tottenham away. And the way Tottenham have played this season, you don't know what version you're going to get of them. So again, but looking through that fixture list, there's games in there we can win. So I think that hopefully that Leicester game could be the catapult to be like, look, we've got the confidence back. We can go into those runner games, Brentford away, and just be a bit more confident. Because I feel like now, after getting beaten in the FA Cup and 2 defeats on the bounce, I think our confidence is going to be.
And when a player is confident, he puts in that first time cross. He puts that ball across the box. He does that, and it looked like a team who've just had the shit kicked out of them at times on Saturday.
I think the Forest Cup game really just absolutely.
But for a lot
everything.
of these players, this is going to be their first break this week. For a long time.
6 days rest, or 7 days rest is huge, I think, for that recovery. And hopefully get those players just, like Matoma, who I feel like he's talking about the international sort of duty curse. I think he's been definitely part of that. Like I think his form has not been great since he's come back from international duty. And there's players in there that you can just tell they're just tired and they're not their top players. So fingers crossed. Going into Leicester game, we are going to preview that midweek, going into that game. But it's a big sort of final 8 games, I believe now. Is it 8 games left? 8 games left, and it's a big one. 7 games left.
Do you know? When we're talking about this is the worst. It always happens at the end of the pod. I just thought of a great line I was going to say about the transfers, but it was.
Go on. Well, give it to us now, Jack.
No, God, it's completely unrelated. It doesn't really work without any context. I'm going to say. I remember Barber saying when Potter first came in that we wanted evolution, not revolution. I think what we've done a little bit too much in this summer is we've ventured towards the revolution a little bit more than an evolution of players, and I think that's what's meant that it's been quite unstructured team and lots of players getting used to stuff, and we've tried to do a little bit too much a little bit too early, which is I think an option like Enciso or Buonanotte, just to hang around for the rest of the season, would have been better in my mind than someone like Gruder, who could have gone out on loan again. Because I do think now I did start in jest a thread on North Stand chat in the vein of the old Spanish Dave, what does he do, with a Brian Gruder, what does he do? And that is because I want him to do well, because Spanish Dave, of course, went on to be a great player for the club, a real cult hero. So I think there is a lot in Brian Gruder. So
yeah, no, I agree with you though. I agree with you though that there was players, instead of Buonanotte and Cisse going out on loan, we could have sent out a player like Gruder out on loan to get that experience rather than throwing him in at the deep end. And I felt really bad for Cashin as well the other day against Villa, just throwing him at the deep end, 20 minutes to go, and you've just thrown him in the deep end, and he's
now he's going to start again.
Swim.
Now he's going to start again.
No, exactly. And just quickly, I know we've sort of gone on so many tangents this podcast, but just quickly, I think another thing as well for Weaver, for example, I think starting him, he'd have a much better time from the off. I think him coming off the bench has not been helping him at all. And I think if he used to start games, I think that genuinely would help him so much more, because he can feel his way into the game.
And now we've had bad form, there's no reason to not start him. Because I'd argue for the last couple of games, we shouldn't have started him because people have been playing well. But now we've been crap for the last couple of games.
Like, for example, Gomez has not exactly pulled up trees
since
recently.
internationals. He's not.
Exactly. And again, travelling, all over the world. And anyway, well, we've gone on many tangents. I think this is a good time to wrap it up. But no, Jack, thank you so much for joining me as always. It's great to always get your insight. And it was one of those frustrating days, but hopefully we bounce back against Leicester.
Good news. The under-21s won their first league game of the year today.
Wow.
Beat Liverpool 2-1. Harry Howell and someone else got a goal. I can't remember who they
Good. The fact you were there is quite worrying. But no, thanks, Jack, for that under-21 update. And on that note, we shall say thank you so much for tuning in.
I always like to shout out 21s players.
He's got to check it.
I always like to shout out under 20. Joe Belmont. He's an 18, so really good for him to get his first goal for the under 21. Good. So another.
Well, hopefully, Jack, we don't either release them or send them out on loan, and they never come back to the club. So fingers crossed, the young crop can.
My
come
therapy
through.
This week is last few weeks. This whole week I've pretty much only watched Brighton play football. And I think it's about time I started venturing into other teams' football and watch that live, and that'll cheer me right up. So I'm going to go watch a load of non-league nonsense for the next, week and a bit, and then we'll be back against Leicester, ready to go again.
Good man, Jack. Well, listen, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening, watching, however you're consuming this. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review if you do enjoy our podcasts. And we shall see you for the Leicester game. Peace.